as the resident flat.
As the token flat resident.
Yeah, coming as like the token flat resident on the couch. How essentially does it work whereby you have solar panels on the roof of your flat? How does that energy then get equally distributed amongst the residents in the building then? Like, is it the case that everyone gets the same amount?
We're looking at anything between, let's say, 200 up to 500 pounds yearly savings for each resident. And if you have battery storage, we can talk even about more saving.
And so at the moment then, is SolShare's a unique product really in this specific space?
It's the world's only product.
Hello and welcome to Positive Energy, the podcast powered by the Eco Experts. This is the podcast we invite experts on to help you make informed decisions about investing in green energy for your home. This week we're looking at solar panels for flats. So we're going to be asking questions like, can you get solar panels on the roof of your flat? How do you go about getting solar panels on the roof of your flat? How do you make sure that each flat gets its fair share of the electricity? And what kind of government funding is available as well? I'm your host, Chris Hambling, and I'm joined by the editor of the Eco Experts himself, Roland Ellison.
Hello. And today our guest is Ramin Hakimov from Allume Energy. Welcome to Positive Energy, Ramin.
Thank you very much, Roland. Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Coming from as the resident flat.
As the token flat resident.
Yeah, coming as like the token flat resident on the couch. How essentially does it work whereby you have solar panels on the roof of your flat? How does that energy then get equally distributed amongst the residents in the building then? Like, is it the case that everyone gets the same amount? Or if my consumption is higher, am I going to be allocated more than someone else? So how does it actually work?
This is an identical and typical social housing question to ensure that everyone gets the fair share. So basically we have 2-3 different scenarios. Let's say you have different EPC demands or SAP demands in the building. And also let's say, Chris, you have 3-bedroom flat. Roland has 2 beds and I have 1-bed flat. So naturally, organically, you have more electricity demand. So when we commission this system, as a landlord, you can decide allocating different percentages or the different proportion of solar to be delivered to your flat, and then Roland's flat, and then mine. So in order to meet your rising or incremental energy demand. The second scenario, again, you have maybe EPC F property, Roland has EPC D property, and I'm EPC C. So to get the same level of energy efficiency certificate, let's say, so you can allocate again more proportion, more kilowatt peak to your flat, and then Roland's flat, and then mine.
So say, as someone who lives in a flat, I have an electricity provider from like a main, like let's say like Octopus. Will it be the case that, like you said, like throughout the day, I can consume energy using the solar panels, and then once that's run out or consumed, I can then go back onto like the main grid. But throughout the day, I will be making quite a substantial saving then.
Exactly. I mean, you really understood what we do and what we sell. So that's our USP. So you have basically 2 electricity providers in a nutshell. So one is solar energy during the daytime. If you are utilizing different appliances, you consume your energy through solar. And after basically when you don't have any PV generation and you still get your energy from the grid. So the purpose here is to replace the role of the grid energy and lessen the role of the proportion of the grid energy and increase the role of the renewable energy in terms of consumption. And you can save between 20 and up to 50%, really dependent upon the system size and how much kilowatt peak allocation had been allocated to your flat. If you have a mixed tenure, let's say you have lots of young families living in the property and they are coming after 5 p.m., 6 p.m. So basically in order to ensure that really no one is better off in compared to other flats, everyone still gets their allocation. And after the installation, installer or contractor, PV contractor issues MCS certificate. And that's how we also guarantee and make sure that the installation is in high quality. And that's reflected on 2 things. One is Smart Export Guarantee and one is EPC rating or SAP scores. So all the residents are free and independent to choose their electricity providers. So one of the providers may offer 12 pence per kilowatt hour, for instance. Another one may offer 10 pence, another one 5 pence. So everyone have like different revenue and saving streams. So even if you haven't consumed your solar during the daytime because you were absent, you still get your allocation, which means you still get your money in different terms. And also, if you just stay at home and spend most of the time at home, you consume your solar. So there are 2 basically revenue or saving streams for all the residents.
According to the Office of National Statistics, 5.5 million households in England and Wales are either flats, maisonettes, or apartments. And as the cost of housing continues to increase, more and more of us are living in flats. But retrofitting things like solar panels and wind turbines to blocks of flats has traditionally been a bit of a challenge. So Ramin, can you tell us what traditionally some of those challenges and problems have been?
So first of all, no hardware solution or technology was invented in the market to enable the connection of rooftop solar to be delivered, to be connected to multi-tenanted buildings. So that's the first one to start with. The second, we have numerous technical challenges that we can talk about. So in terms of installation, physical access to each apartment resident, lots of individual systems, lots of individual inverters had to be installed physically within each individual flat, which raises lots of safety questions, hazards, because you need to have DC cabling routing to each inverter. And again, that's a safety question, and lots of disruption to building, lots of resident engagement, which is sometimes like social housing providers is something that they want to have like minimum resident engagement. Also a different performance, lack of available roof space, and a couple of other commissioning problems as well.
Okay, and so how does SolShare help solve some of those problems?
So traditionally, we can look at two PV systems. So one is you have an existing PV system connected to the communal supply, to the landlord, which really none of the stakeholders benefits from the system. So you have a threshold in terms of exporting the excess of energy to grid, which is sometimes 5 pence. So basically you lose your investment. So there is no return on investment. The second, and which is the only way of connecting rooftop solar until the SolShare solar system, is installing lots of individual systems. So let's say you have a block of 30 flats. You had to have 30 individual systems, 30 inverters, which all of them need to be installed within each individual flat. And again, this raises lots of challenges and questions, and in terms of cost exercise as well. We realize that it's not fair for the people, for the blocks of flats, because they have been left out with a solution to be connected to rooftop solar. Because individual houses, terraced houses, bungalows, masonettes have been benefiting, but no blocks of flats. And usually that's the most difficult to retrofit block of flat. And we invented a piece of hardware, which is called the SolShare. It's the world's only hardware technology which connects the rooftop solar to multiple flats within the same apartment block. And the business basically launched in 2015 in Australia, but we expanded to New Zealand, England, Wales, Scotland, Germany, and US. So currently we are delivering more than 5 gigawatts of hours green energy across the globe.
Okay, and so how does it work if one flat or some of the flats wanted to have like a solar battery, and so they would like drawing more of the energy from the panels than some of the others, for example?
Roland, have you been working with social housing providers before?
No.
Because this is a question they typically ask. So it's one of the huge advantages of the SolShare is it's technology agnostic. So it can work with any PV panel, any inverter, any other low carbon or energy efficient technology. So basically one of the projects we had in London, in Barnet area, for instance, we have a combination of different technologies like PV diverter, heat water tank, DC coupled communal batteries, for instance. So that option, that scenario might happen in the owner occupied or in the private sector, because you have leaseholders, basically everyone is somehow free to decide what they want. But we have two major markets from Allume Energy perspective. One is social housing landlords, housing associations and local authorities and charities. The second market is the property developers, new builds, construction companies, house builders. And we see the demand whether you have a battery storage for all the residents or no battery storage at all. So we don't really prefer having that option. Some of the residents benefiting from the system, but leaving all others behind. But in a nutshell, to answer your question, you can pair it, the SolShare, with DC-coupled communal batteries, with PV diverter, which actually diverts excess of energy to heat the water tank, for instance. So hot water tank, heat pumps, EV charger, infrared heating system. All of this combination of technologies gives more options to the client, to the landlord, to decarbonize their housing stock and achieve their net zero goals faster.
And I know you've worked on a couple of projects in the UK recently. I think there was one in Wales, some in Manchester.
Yep.
Can you tell us a little bit more about like the types of buildings that those were installed on, what kind of residents they had, and how that benefited the people within those blocks?
So one of them, to start with, as you say, in Manchester, so that was the social housing decarbonisation funded project. So basically that's a government funded 8 billion funding allocated to social housing landlords in England. So we successfully delivered 4 schemes, so 81 flats across 4 projects in Manchester. So all social housing tenants have been benefiting from the SolShare solar system since the commissioning date. And we had a mixed tenure as well, so leaseholders, but the housing landlord basically decided to connect all the social housing tenanted flats to the SolShare solar system. So we're talking about hundreds of kilowatt system here. One of the huge challenges was, according to the retrofit designers or coordinators assessment, there wasn't any other fabric first or any energy efficiency measure or retrofit measure in the market to allocate different proportions of solar or different kilowatt peaks to meet different EPC demands. All those 4 schemes, let's say ground floor flats or top floor flats, they had lower EPC rated flats, so they had to achieve the EPC level of C, despite the fact that some of the flats have EPC E, some of them EPC F, some of them D. So the SolShare makes it tailorable. So we allocated different proportions, different kilowatt peak allocations, much more precise than any other individual system in the market. So to meet that demand, to get the same level of EPCs, and also to help the residents tackle full poverty and save energy bills while reducing CO2 emissions for the residents. So they had a request to change the application because of the SolShare, because that was the only option. And Business for Energy Security and Net Zero Department accepted the request for change. So the SolShare being utilised as the only solution which made it possible. In terms of Wales, there is another Welsh government's funding stream. It's called Optimise Retrofit Programme in Wales. So we had the flagship project in Cardiff, another block of 24. Each residence gets 2.6 kilowatt peak. And also you asked about batteries. So they had 3 kilowatt hours battery storage as well, but the communal batteries for 24 households. So they are precisely today saving 50% in terms of energy bills per month. So
and that's each flat within
each flat. So
wow.
That's huge.
It's yearly savings. We're talking about £400-500 yearly savings for each residence. So a couple of other schemes like Eco4, another funding stream, so energy obligation schemes, so energy utility companies in the UK, they have to support the households who are in full poverty or they're living in the less energy efficient homes. So they're supporting energy efficient measures to be implemented to those flats and individual houses as well. So the SolShare being approved by Ofgem as an innovation measure with the highest uplift, 4 to 5%. So which means if you have a block of flat and if the solar is eligible measure, because there are lots of requirements to meet and a bit of complication over there as well, typically with the funding streams. So if you have the SolShare, you get higher score. And if you get higher score, the social housing landlord and the also contractor gets higher portion of funding allocated from the government. So everyone is basically, all the stakeholders is better off.
Right.
And we have other new build projects as well, which have been completed in London and also all over the UK. And one of these is modular house builder Top Hat. We have 6 blocks of 90 flats and each block with 15 flats, because the SolShare can be connected to 15 flats, but it's a modular system. So if you have a block of 30, you need to have 2 SolShares and 2 inverters instead of having 30 individual systems and 30 inverters, which again raises like maintenance support fees in the long run, lots of expenditure, which is typical question that I get asked from my clients, like, what's the maintenance cost? What's the labor cost? What's the warranty? And then the SolShare comes like with 10 years warranty, for instance. So there is no maintenance cost.
And so at the moment then, is SolShare's a unique product really in this specific space?
It's the world's only product across the globe, and it's been patented all over the major markets that we've been operating, even some of the markets that we're still yet to expand our presence in different European markets or Asian markets or in the North America. Also, as I said, just talking about the benefits, the eco project in Bexhill is called Belmont House in Bexhill. It's out of 36 flats. I think we had 28 connections, and together with other fabric first measures like capital wall insulation, loft insulation. So one of the advantages is you can disconnect some of the flats. So if you have a leaseholder and social housing tenants flats, you can have either you can connect all of them or you can leave some flats disconnected. So if the leaseholder decides to contribute financially, for instance,
Right.
you can always connect and disconnect. And we have this remote control option. So we've simplified everything basically for the clients.
So it's a case where, like, yeah, the landlord's benefiting from it, the homeowners are benefiting from the free energy and maybe sending stuff back from the smart export guarantee. So everyone's kind of a winner in that scenario then, I suppose.
Yeah, in international relations, there's a win-win theory. So this is exactly is implemented in this
Right.
in this sector. We're looking at anything between, let's say, 200 up to 500 pounds yearly savings for each residence. And if you have battery storage, we can talk even about more saving.
I've had more people coming from the electricity company to check my meter since I had the smart meter installed than before when I just had an old school meter. I don't know why.
Maybe they just want you to benefit more each time.
Maybe. Is it mandatory now that they have solar panels installed when they're building blocks of flats?
I think the driving force is
When you say as well, like, you're saving up to like 40, 50% on your electricity bills, like, what's the monetary value of that for a flat owner?
Yeah, we're looking at anything between, let's say, 200 up to 500 pounds yearly savings for each residence. Not all, but just each residence. Again, because each case study is different, client requirements and expectations are different. So we're looking at anything between, again, 200, 300, 400 pounds, depending upon the size of the system, kilowatt hours they receive. And if you have battery storage, we can talk even about more saving because usually they store the energy and they try to use it over the night.
So in Chris's example then, so if he's out in the office all day or he's away with work and he's getting his set allocation every day, if he's not using that in his flat, he's sending that back via the smart and export guarantee and making money kind of either way. He's either saving because he's not using much energy from the grid, or he's passing it back to the grid and earning money from that.
That's
energy.
Exactly the case. So we guarantee that everyone gets their fair allocation or everyone get their allocated kilowatt hours. In order to get smart export guarantee, that's a condition and a technical actually issue. You need to have smart export ready meter in the flat.
Yes.
So if you don't have smart export ready meter, if you have an old meter, in other words, it doesn't jeopardize you benefiting from the SolShare solar system, but it basically means you won't be eligible for smart export guarantee.
So is that something like, as a tenant, then I would have to individually pursue myself to make sure I've got that kind of readiness?
Exactly. So it's a request comes from the tenant side, and basically utility companies upgrade your electrical setup. So in terms of they upgrade the meter and replace the old meter with a smart meter. And this is when you become eligible to get the smart export guarantee.
I think most energy companies now, they're rolling out smart meters to most properties.
Like as standard.
Yeah, standard now. And I mean, it's weird because I've got one in my house and I've had more people coming from the electricity company to check my meter since I had the smart meter installed than before when I just had an old school meter. I don't know why that is. Maybe they're looking to see if the smart meter's working or...
Yeah, I believe so. Maybe they just want you to benefit more each time.
Maybe. Let's hope so.
Well, that's right, because smart meters are generally utilized now, especially in the new builds. So we basically, for us, there are two major markets. One is, again, like social housing side, another one construction companies, house builders, new residential developments. And you're rightly saying, Roland, so all of them comes with smart meters. And sometimes they are co-located in a communal space, in basement, in a plant room or in a meter room. Sometimes they are in each floor in riser, and sometimes meters are installed within each individual flat. That's imperative, I think critically important to highlight that for all these electrical setups, SolShare's installation is not an issue at all. So we have very minimal and most of the times no resident engagement at all because we don't have any hardware installations within each individual flat.
Right, so it's just no disruption for them whatsoever.
No resident, engagement. When we say engagement, in a positive way.
Yeah.
We don't really disrupt their lives.
Right.
We don't really cause disruption to the building, and we don't have any safety questions to be raised because there is no hardware installation. There is no DC cable running to each flat. So the only connection point for us is, let's say, Roland, your meter is in your flat. So we need, installing needs to run the AC cable. So it's safe.
Right,
AC cable to the consumer unit. And that's the connection point for the SolShare. and that's the only resident engagement element happens. Apart from that, you don't have to be physically in your house for me to install the system. This is where I'm coming from. So you don't really to open your doors to the installers. No one really needs to have access to your apartment if the meters are in each floor or they are co-located in a basement or in a communal area. So there are the benefits of having individual systems again, because the SolShare always somehow installed in a communal area, in a communal space. So no hardware installations in a nutshell.
So what would you say to landlords and housing associations who are looking to install solar panels on their blocks of flats? Like, what is the maximum number of floors or number of flats they could benefit from solar panels in each one of those flats?
Usually we are working with low mid-rise properties. So SolShare is suitable for low mid-rise properties, but we can work with some high-rise buildings as well. So when I say low mid-rise, maybe up to 8 floors, up to maybe 9 floors. But when you have it, for instance, in Manchester, again, I have a client, Social Housing Association. They have funding and they're looking at like 16 floors apartment. So we're talking about more than 100 flats, for instance, which usually we're looking at in one block, maybe up to 60 or 70 flats, because you need to have available space and you need to make sure that everyone really benefits from the system. So otherwise it doesn't make any sense. And it's not, a viable option to allocate just 200 watts to the residents, because at the end of the day, you want everyone really benefit. And typically we're looking at always like 1 kilowatt peak per flat. So for them to save some money, like 20-30%.
Right. Otherwise,
but we have some case studies where we allocated 500 watts or 700 watts or 800 watts as well, where still people are benefiting from the system. But for high-rise buildings, so imagine you have 120 flats, you have 16-floor apartment, you have very minimal space on the rooftop.
Yeah.
So our innovative solution is, if you have a car parking space, for instance, you can install like solar canopy, like solar carports. You can utilize that on-site generated energy and distribute that generated energy to multiple flats. So that's one of the options. Or maybe they have just surrounding area or green space that you can install panels and still that's beneficial for them. But if they don't have any space, so that wouldn't be the viable option for the SolShare solar system.
With new builds, is it mandatory now that they have solar panels installed when they're building blocks of flats, or is it just like based on SAP scores and EPC ratings that they calculate that kind of thing?
I think the driving force is EPCs, as you rightly said, according to the SAP 10.2 PV credits. So each connect needs to be connected to rooftop solar, because traditionally we're talking about the PV installation connected to the landlord supply.
Yeah.
You're not eligible to get any SAP credits or EPC rating or uplift because of that. Because of the
landlord is getting the benefit.
Exactly.
Right.
So just because of that regulation at the moment, you're not eligible to get any EPC uplifts. So basically, somehow it's optional, but it's also mandatory. So basically each flat needs to be connected to the rooftop solar so that you can make it much more energy efficient home.
Right.
And also if you want to, it's also, I think, the commercial interest as well. If it's powered by sun and solar energy, you have, better opportunity to sell it maybe higher prices in terms of like new builds and leaseholders, private, owners. Everyone would prefer to buy a house which is powered by solar panels rather than just buying a house which there is no renewable energy. In today's realities, I think more or less 80% of the society would be prone to choose electrically, solar powered heated properties. So there is a bit of complexity around it, but I think it's mandatory according to the SAP regulations.
Okay, so they make it so that the numbers mean that you have to basically do it to meet the requirement.
Basically, you have to convince everybody that it's the best option for them if they really want to save. EPC rating must be lower, so you should be in full poverty. So there are some eligibility criteria that you have to meet before getting the funding from the government. So new builds, they get a planning permission. So let's say you are building a residential complex for 200 flats. 20-25% of them has to be affordable housing.
From a private resident's point of view, the admin and bureaucracy involved in getting everyone's agreement, getting all of the paperwork in place for installing solar panels on your flat? It must feel quite daunting. Like you, Chris,
Yeah.
how would that even work? Like, would you approach your WhatsApp group in your building?
Exactly. Like one of my questions would be like, if you were like a tenant in a building and you've heard about SolShare and you want the building to benefit from it, like how do I as an individual go about organizing that and speaking to the landlord? Because I know like it can differ from house to house, but sometimes people don't have the best relationship or dialogue with their landlord in the first place. Like how would I go about doing something like that essentially?
I mean, from our experience, I think each building has like resident association or asset managers. I mean, there are different names, which is
representatives.
Yeah, I mean, representatives of the owner, because they own and manage the property overall. It should be coming from their side, and you should be having overall consensus, because at the end of the day, you have to financially contribute because you are the private owners, homeowners. And we actually tested for around 6 months, whether it is worth working with the private sector or owner-occupied.
Right.
So we had this bitter experience already. And I call bitter because that's lots of stakeholder engagement now. So because it is very difficult to achieve the general consensus. So everyone needs to contribute, or let's say you have a block of 10, just 2 leaseholders are happy to contribute. It wouldn't be a viable option. So if you have at least 5, 6 tenants that everyone is willing to contribute, and that at that point of time, then would be willing to incorporate the SolShare solar system. But apart from that, it takes huge amount of time to do lots of presentations, talk to residents, back and forth. Board meetings, once a month or once in a quarter, they come together, discuss the things, and it takes time. It's time consuming. Basically, you have to convince everybody that it's the best option for them.
Yeah,
if they really want to save, it's investment around 2 to 4K per flat, but you see the benefits straight away, like in a couple of years' time, because considering that you save around 200 up to £500. The return on investment or payback period should be around 5 to 7, 8 years. So if you own the property, you will be always benefiting.
So when you say they have to contribute, a few grand each, is that before things like the government grants and funds are applied, or afterwards? Or could I as a tenant apply for that grant and take some of the edge off the costs for everyone?
It's an interesting case. So if you have a lower EPC rated property, as far as I know, there are some, eco is one of the options.
Yeah.
But if you are living fairly new in a new apartment, so your EPC rating is C and above, then everyone has to contribute because there is no other funding stream.
Right.
Because that's your own investment for your own asset.
Well, that's all we have time for on today's episode of Positive Energy. Thank you so much to Ramin for being in the hot seat and answering all of our questions.
Thanks very much,
If you've got a question about solar panels, heat pumps, EPC ratings, or EV cars, then drop a comment in the comment section and maybe we can cover it in a future episode of Positive Energy.
Or you can contact us via our social channels. We're the Eco Experts on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Or alternatively, you can email us at info@theecoexperts.co.uk.
In the show notes, you'll find out more information about solar panels for flats at theecoexperts.com. But make sure that you like and subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified for when the next video goes live. But I think that's all we have time for. Thanks very much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.